2020.
I move that the communication be ordered received, recorded in the minutes, and filed.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
yes,
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Mr. Pecknold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. As you're well aware, this is the kind of the kickoff of our budget season, the presentation of the tax budget. This is my 15th one of these, and I think this may be the strangest one that I've encountered. But we'll go back and first review the purpose of the tax budget, just as a reminder that it's basically the revenue side of the house, and it's a revenue document which establishes millages for real estate tax collections. It establishes our base level for the of revenue for the upcoming year, and when you combine that with our projected cash balances, that establishes limits on the upcoming year's appropriations. So that's the purpose of the tax budget. We've had a challenge this year as far as coming up with the revenue estimates, and shall we say this is probably in flux a little bit. We don't know how the pandemic is going to unfold and the continued impact on our revenues, how long that will last, etc. So this is awfully early in the year to establish any firm revenue estimates, but we're doing the best we can with our projections at this point in time. Regina, do you have the PowerPoint presentation? We can carry, there we go. Since I probably jumped the gun on you a little bit, let's move on to the third slide, the estimated real estate taxes. There we go. Thank you. So this is, the cities does not rely heavily on real estate taxes, but we do have some. We have the special police levy, which is 3 mills, and we expect that to generate about $2.5 million in revenue for 2021. And police and fire pension is 0.6 of a mil, and that's a little over $500,000. That debt will be paid off in 2023, and that will expire at that point in time. The Conservancy District is a pass-through. They have asked for $400,000, and our projections at this point in time is that'll be about 0.47 mils. So the total millage available to the city through real estate taxes is a little over 4 mils, and it'll generate about $3.4 million. That's based on assessed value of about $845 million, or $2.4 billion in market value for the city as a whole. Next slide, please. Okay, the next slide shows the makeup of our projected revenues for the general fund. We are projecting that in 2021 that we will have $35,190,000 going to the general fund. That's a substantial drop over where we were in what we were projecting for 2020, and slightly under the levels that we were at for 2019. Interest income is about $400,000. Our fines, licenses, and charges, all those service type items, is about $3.4 million. State shared taxes, which that is what I'll call sin taxes. It's a cigarette and liquor tax that we receive, is about $87,500. Local government fund, we're projecting it based on the most recent information we have from the state at $1.7 million. I don't know whether that number will hold or not. We haven't gotten any further guidance from the state at this point, but it wouldn't surprise me to see that number drop a little bit as we move further into the budgeting season. And then the all other, which is kind of a catch-all, is about $4.1 million. And the biggest component of that is the the reimbursements that we have from other funds to the general fund for services. So all in all, we're projecting about $45 million for next year's estimated receipts in the general fund.
Mark, Dave Estrup here.
Yes.
Regina, could you go back to the previous slide, please? Thank you. On the total assessed valuation, are you anticipating that going up or down? Or what's your read on the assessed valuation at this point?
Well, seeing as those collections will be a year in arrears, I think we have a
Right.
pretty good handle on what the 2020 is. That we are going up slightly year to year of our assessed valuations. The addition of homes out in the new development, as well as Tokray and Silfex's additions may contribute to an increase in our valuation come 2021, which will be collected in 2022.
Right.
So we are increasing slightly now. Again, the downturn in the economy related to COVID, I think, is probably temporary as far as those values go, but we'll have to see how that all plays out.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
All right. And then the major operating and capital funds. This kind of just gives you a broad overview of where the city's monies or receipts are. The general fund is the biggest piece of that, about 50% at the $44,981,000. Our utilities funds bring in just under $30 million annually. Street funds, which are made up of permissive tax and gasoline tax, are about $4.3 million. PI, which is a function of how much income tax revenue we collect, we're projecting at about $5.4 million. CDBG about 1.6, and then, as mentioned earlier, the special police levy fund at about $3,568,000. So that just, as a pie chart, gives you a breakdown of where this money's coming into the city. We have a lot of other grant funds and such that are not portrayed here, but this covers the majority of the items. Next slide, please. And this slide really will just give you a general flavor for the fact that our income tax is our lifeblood. It runs at about 80% of close to 80% of our general fund revenue. That percentage over time has increased, making us more dependent upon that income tax. And I point that out simply because it makes us more subject to fluctuations in the economy. So when there's a downturn in the economy, or better yet, when the economy gets a cold, we're going to get one also. So, but that's really what I'm trying to portray with this slide, is our dependence in the general fund on income tax and how important it is to us. So that really is the nuts and bolts of the tax budget. And I'd be happy to, in my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about it.
Any questions from commissioners?
I just wanted to make sure that our citizens understand that this is a tentative budget. Is that correct, Mark?
It's tentative and our first step. We really aren't doing anything with the expense side of it yet, other than maybe some broad estimates to kind of see where we're at. We developed that budget over the course of the summer and early fall in expectation of presenting that to you on November 1st as the manager's budget. And there was a lot of detailed calculations that go into that, and on both the revenue and expense side. And I think we'll have a better handle on, what our economy is doing as we move further into the late summer and into early fall. This is just a first pass at it, and Again, it's awfully early to be able to tell in any year, much less this one with such unusual circumstances.
So this is a budget for the calendar year, which would begin next January. So we're very early in the process, right?
That's correct.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
This is, it's my usual question I usually ask at the end of the meeting, Mark, but it seems appropriate since we're looking ahead at the budget. How are we doing right now in terms of revenue?
Right now, in terms of revenue, I just got the June income tax numbers, kind of hot off the press, so to speak, about half an hour ago. We are down 10.3% year to date. Withholding took a major dip in June. It's off about 18%. I kind of had expected, I expected it actually at the beginning of May, and it's kind of coming home to roost now. I would hope that we're starting to recover a little bit as things open back up here in Ohio, but this was not unexpected. To this point in time, our cash is holding well in our major funds. We still have total cash for the city of about $68 million. Our general fund is a little over $11 million. Several commission meetings ago, I was reporting to you that it was over 12 million. So we've dropped about $1 million in cash at this point in time. That is concerning, but not alarming at this point.
Are we still thinking that we can avoid layoffs or furloughs?
Yes, we are. We are. I don't see the need for layoffs or furloughs at this point in time.
Good. Good. We have put, I know, a number of capital projects on the back burner or pulled them all together. But I think at the end of the day, we're still a people business, and we need to do everything we can to hang on to the great people who work for the city.
I couldn't agree with you more. We are trying to, again, I've used the phrase constantly, but manage to the resources we have. Again, we still have a nice cash balance, and I expect to see it dip as we move through the summer, but we are still in a decent position at this point in time.
Well, my thanks to you and the rest of the staff for continuing to work on this and keep things in perspective and in balance. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Is there a motion to, do we have anyone in the audience who wanted to respond to this? Jill?
I received no comments.
Okay. Then is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Okay, so now we move to the work session. Tom Franson, are you taking the lead on this?
Yes, I think Brian was going to do a general introduction first. Go ahead, Brian.
Brian?
Yep. So I'll kick us off. So this dates back, as Commission remembers, January 31st of 2020, we received the first call early in the morning from Kroger relative to the closure of the South Limestone location, located specifically at 1822 South Limestone Street, that they would be closing that location March 3rd of 2020. As you know, we went into quick response from there, the staff and working with partner agencies and organizations in the community to develop a solution for this property that would hopefully result in a positive out of the negative of programming, which created a larger issue in terms of food access. We already had issues in terms of food access with only Kroger being in that South Limestone corridor, but that was obviously intensified by Kroger leaving that location. February 3rd of 2020, we made the first request to Kroger, asking them to consider donating the building without any restrictions being placed on the deed at transfer to the community, that the community could work hand in hand together to develop a solution for the Kroger location, and specifically looking at the larger South Limestone corridor. As you know, we've held several meetings after that period, both leadership meetings and also a public forum that was held in February that had many residents and community members attend to voice, one, their concern, but also their desire to see something positive come out of this. Then COVID hit and obviously changed a lot of the game plan in terms of the ability for staff to meet with the work groups. 3 work groups were established at the public forum, and we've been able to keep in touch with them through email correspondence, but because of the limitation on the gathering, no more than 10 gathering from the governor during COVID, we have been unable to meet in person. But again, our staff, Shannon Meadows, Logan Cobbs, Tom Franzen, who were the leads of each of those 3 work groups, have kept them up to date and kept correspondence to them about what we were working on as a staff for the project. We have had several individuals and organizations approach us about helping develop and find a solution for the property. And one of those I'm glad to introduce you to today, that we are ready to take the next step in terms of a letter of intent and working with the Dillon company, Dillon LLC, to work towards the redevelopment of the former Kroger location. And as you will see, a much larger vision for the South Limestone corridor. Tom Franzen has been the lead on staff for this project. Can't speak enough, just commend him for the work that he's continued to do, even during these unprecedented times of COVID, and really to all of our staff for their continued work. It would have been easy to kind of put this on the, the side burner and not move forward with everything that was going on, but our staff has remained determined and focused in finding answers and solutions to the challenge we face with the closure of this Kroger location. With that, I will turn it over to Tom, and Tom will do a more kind of thorough introduction of Larry Dillon. And then I'm also glad to say that we have Larry Dillon on the call with us today to introduce himself and talk a little bit about what we should expect to see in the coming months. With that, Tom.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, commissioners. Just a quick kind of overview of what we'll be talking about. I'll do a general introduction of Mr. Dillon. In the short time we've got to know him, I know he won't take enough time to kind of brag on himself and his experience, so I will take a moment to do that. Then we'll ask Larry to kind of provide an overview of his company and his development philosophy and why he's interested in helping us with this project. Then we'll review the letter of intent, summarize that for the commissioners, and then ask Larry to kind of go over kind of his vision of what he's put together based off some of the early stakeholder input that he's received. And then we'll talk about our public outreach and engagement process to conclude, and then have some questions and answers for commissioners. So that's the general kind of approach that we're going to have here as we move forward. Well, I'd like to begin just by describing a little bit about Larry Dillon. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Dillon Development. Over the course of Larry's career, he's deployed over $10 billion in real estate investments around the globe. He's done international work and consulting with Fortune 500 companies. His experience includes a whole host of things related to development, from on-site construction, engineering, project management, community real estate consulting, and master plan development. So all of those components we're going to lean on heavily for this project. Larry encourages visionary thinking. He values consensus building and problem-solving tactics as his standard approach, and his effectiveness as a change leader has contributed to the success of local, regional, and national projects. Larry's interest in this project originated after he read about the Kroger's closing, which Brian kind of alluded to. He reached out early to community leaders to ask how he could help. He called a meeting along with some community leaders to engage the stakeholders to understand what the challenges and opportunities were related to the Kroger store and the South Limestone corridor in general. From there, he began to kind of think about the potential development concepts that he started to share with us. So very early, we realized Larry's passion and interest in helping this community. He recognizes the challenge that's posed there, and he's certainly up to that challenge. From the very beginning with our conversations, Larry's talked about collaboration and the importance of community input. They've remained top of mind, and those attributes remain as the cornerstones of the other projects he's developed around the region. So just want to take a moment to give a little background on Larry, because I know he won't do himself justice. So, but at this point, I'd like to introduce Larry and ask you just kind of provide an overview maybe of your company and your development philosophy and your involvement here in this project. So Larry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom. That's a humbling introduction. Can everybody hear me okay?
Can hear you, but it can't see you. Is there anything we can do about that, Jim?
It may be just the number of people you're seeing on your screen, Kevin.
4.
I apologize for that. If you can't see me, you're not missing anything. So
Right.
let's start with that. I'll keep going, and if hopefully the video shows, it does show on my screen that,
Yeah, we
that the
can see
video
you,
is
Larry.
running, so I'll just keep rolling with it. So as Tom mentioned, our background and approach as a developer is a little bit different. I've done a lot of things in the real estate arena over the years, and I gravitated toward doing larger scale master plan community projects. The first one of those I undertook was in the Toledo, Ohio market, a suburb where one of my Fortune 500 real estate clients was looking for input on how to develop a 400-acre site. And the bottom line of that is we created a $500 million vision that's a mixed-use community. And that was in 1999 when I started working on that in partnership with the city of Perrysburg. And I'm happy to say that we are still the master developer of that site some 20 years later. Any project that gets built on that site passes across my desk to take a look at and see if it's in compliance with the design standards and signage standards and operating rules that we put in place for the project originally. So we are accustomed. Since then, we've looked at several other communities, helped several other communities put together larger scale projects. Some of that as an economic development advisor, some of that as an actual developer, some in combination. It is true that our goal is to create environments that strengthen a community. So when we look at a challenge like the Kroger site, it doesn't work for us to just look at the Kroger building. We need to look at the area around it and see what that fabric looks like, try and understand what's there, what attributes there are, what challenges there are. And then our goal is to knit a fabric that is stronger so that when we're done, that we've made a community contribution. That's important to us because from an investment standpoint, we have a long-term view. So our approach to a project is to invest in it as though we're going to be owners of it for at least 30 years, as opposed to build it, stabilize it, and flip it. That's not us. We're interested in building a portfolio, being integrated into a community, and helping that community be stronger. And if the community is stronger, then our real estate will perform better for our investors as well. So that's our prototypical approach. As it relates to the Kroger project, yes, when we heard that Kroger was abandoning the south side of Springfield, one of our employees, Pat Williams, is actually a resident of Springfield. And he had reached out to me and said, "Hey, Larry, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, let's get a hold of Brian and Tom and see if there's anything we can do to help." So that's where we started. As Tom mentioned, we suggested a meeting of stakeholders that perhaps I could facilitate. And the goal was to find out from residents and community leaders how they view not only the closing of Kroger, but how do they view the South Side community, and what could be done to turn around what looks like a cycle of disinvestment and turn it into a cycle of reinvestment in that whole South Side community. So that's, we got a lot of great information. It was a very interactive dialogue. We made a long list of challenges and opportunities and goals that people would like to see accomplished associated with the redevelopment of the Kroger building, but also the broader surrounding community. Based upon that, I got together with the designer that we typically use, and we said, how could we create a toehold investment that would be a catalyst for future investment, additional investment? And so, Jill or Regina, can you put on the screen the concept plan? Yeah. So we took a look, as I mentioned, we took a look beyond the borders of the Kroger site, but recognizing that the Kroger footprint is the right place to start with investment. But if we were going to start there, where else would we go? Well, that's really important from both the perspective of the community and from investors. The redevelopment of that Kroger building is not free. It requires investment. It requires perhaps debt to be put in place by a lender. And so how do I create confidence in those folks that they can make an investment that's going to make a difference and is going to be sustainable long term? So our target has been to not just introduce a grocer. We'd love to reintroduce a grocer, but we recognize the history. The more recent history is that every grocer that's been there has pulled out. So how do we not only bring a grocer to the table to help solve an immediate food crisis for the neighborhood, but how do we make it a sustainable investment so that it's there long term? We do that by adding other interests at the same time. So what we put together as a concept was also leveraged by the way we have invested in other communities, where we not only create interesting architecture and a lineup of tenants, but we also create community space that we can then program with activities. So within our development company, we also have another group, the Dillon Events team, that does nothing but plan to program community fundraising events or just community events in general at our locations so that it drives traffic, so that we have a heartbeat inside of our investment. It's not just a piece of real estate. It's a place where people can gather and be a community. So the plan actually that we suggested was to not only convert the Kroger building into something more than just a grocery store, but also create community space adjacent to that we could program for activities. So Regina, if you could put the rendering, there you go. So the concept that we've talked about here is to not only acquire the Kroger building, but also the building adjacent to it on the south, and tear that building down, create an outdoor events plaza, and then design it so that we could add food trucks. So you see that in the photo, in the image, there's a half a dozen food trucks lined up there. We would specifically design the space so that we could not only bring in bands perhaps, or have an ice cream social, or a small art gathering, but also bring food trucks that can bring additional excitement and energy to what we're doing. That's a concept plan that's representative of the way that we think. It's not only about the building and the uses inside the building, but how do we create a community destination out of what we're doing? In this particular case, the fact that ODOT is already planning improvements on limestone is an advantage for us. Regina, if you could go backwards one slide to the other way. There you go. So we came up with the idea of perhaps saying, how do we emphasize all the things that are going on at the four corners at the intersection of John and Limestone, so that we think about, from a planning standpoint, how do we not only have an investment in the Kroger site, but how do we impact the connectivity to the neighborhood going east and west from there, as well as north and south. So there's a new streetscape that's planned by ODOT to go down Limestone. We'd like to replicate that, going a block and a half to 2 blocks east and west from the Limestone intersection, so that we connect it back into the neighborhood and create a pedestrian-oriented, walkable environment. And then we start to, over time, take a look at how do we either repurpose buildings or add new building structures that reinforce the positive investment in this area, and then plan to radiate out from that. So what you see is in this and in the perspective rendering is a vision for where we would start. But we believe that what we ought to do is we ought to brand this area of Springfield as the Four Corners. And so the next slide, our designer put together an example of some signage that could be utilized to signify, right at the corner, this is a special district. You're in a special area. It's not just, this is where you come to get groceries. I've talked a lot. I should probably stop there and talk about how we move forward. This is not, what we're proposing here is not a final design. It's not a final solution, but it does give you an idea directionally as to how we think and how we might suggest moving forward in a way to engage the community. So Tom and Brian and I have talked about having more stakeholder meetings with people in the area to get more information, let them react to an initial plan and give us suggestions as to perhaps how to change it, scrap it, or make it better. Tom, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you described it very well. I think it's the concept, right? And I think we've always found that when we're doing these kinds of exercises or seeking community input, that you need a conversation starter. You need something for people to react to. So we think it's good for that. We think it's a solid kind of visioning piece that helps people imagine how it can be improved, and will serve us well as we go out and start to ask, what are the market gaps? What kind of stores or amenities should we be going after to fill some of these spaces? Or what types of uses should we be looking to kind of complement that grocer that will occupy a portion of that Kroger space? So I don't have anything to add to this concept. Brian, do you have anything?
I just wanted to emphasize again, one of the things that really attracted us to Larry and his company was his thoughtful approach to community engagement and community input. And I think that's so important. And as we learned through the public forums, that's important to the community itself. They want to be engaged, they want to be active, they want to be involved in helping develop a solution for this for this property and along the South Limestone corridor. I think that was also evidenced in our planning study that was conducted just on the transportation corridor from Leffel Lane up to Selma. We probably had the most engagement of any roadway project that we've seen in some time when we did the planning efforts for that. And so we have a community that is hungry and engaged and wants to continue to be engaged in the redevelopment efforts of specifically this corridor, this area. And Larry, from the very beginning, has spoken of the importance of that, not only to this project, but the projects that he does in general, that he wants that community engagement and that activism in helping develop solutions. And so we're excited. We're excited for the next step in this process. Obviously, again, COVID-19 has changed the way that many of us have approached community planning efforts and engagement. And so we are working with Larry and his team now to develop a strategy so that we can push forward through that. It may be that we hold a bunch of stakeholder meetings of 10 or less. And if that's the case, then that's what we're willing to do. But we want to really start moving this quickly. The land bank is working to take title to the property by tomorrow. I know Ethan Harris from the county is working with them on the closing and the purchase agreement. So the land bank should have title to the property here this week. And then we can really get rolling on developing that strategy for redevelopment of this specific property and the corridor as a whole.
So I think it's important for us to know that the item on today's agenda does not buy into the pictures you just saw. It's a contract to work on this, but it may well be that we'll end up with a different plan than the one that was presented today. But you wanted to give us a sense of the kinds of things that Dillon Properties does, right?
That's correct. Yes.
So what we're asking to be voted on is to work with him. We're not voting on this plan. It may change significantly before we get around to that.
That's absolutely correct, Mayor. So the letter of intent really is an agreement between Dillon and the city that we will work together to negotiate and enter into a development services agreement. That development services agreement will contain the plan and will develop a business plan which will identify the types of end users and will also come around whatever the final plan is intended to be. So yes, the letter of intent really is just laying out the property that we're talking about, which is the Kroger property, and the adjoining building that the city has a purchase agreement on next door there at 1841 Clifton. And so those two properties, and then it kind of just lays out how the property will be transferred from the land bank to the city and then to the developer. So it just kind of lays out those basic framework of what would be included in the development services agreement. But so this is a starting point. This is an opportunity for discussion and for public input to help refine what that development services agreement looks like.
Mayor?
Yes.
I just want to say I very much appreciate how this organization, how Dillon is looking at the entire neighborhood area instead of just proposing. And I want to commend Brian and the staff, not to just bring somebody that says, how can we just put a grocery store on this piece of property? So I'm really glad. I agree with the mayor. This is an idea. But I also think that this will help us expand what we can really do with that area. I'm interested in seeing that area tie in with the ethnicity of the area and the culture of that area. And I'm sure Dillon is as well. But I really like the large concept and just helping us think outside of the borders and outside of the box of our mind on this.
And I would like to say that, as the letter of intent, I understand that, but I would like for our citizens to realize right now, the land bank is still in the process of obtaining the building from Kroger. And currently Kroger is the owner of the building. So that letter of intent and all this works together. And I'm looking at, Brian, would you and Tom correct me on this? 30 to 60 days for the land bank to take title for this building, possibly?
Yeah, I would think that we would have title, or the land bank would have title no later than mid-July. They actually hope to take title by the end of this week. They are prepping the closing documents as we speak. So assuming Kroger is going to close here in Springfield through the land bank's title agency. So assuming they can get that scheduled for this week, I would actually think they would take title no later than the end of this week.
Okay, and at that point, then Dylan could start to engage our community and stakeholders. Is that correct?
Yeah, so with the commission considering the letter of intent today, if you adopt that letter of intent and authorize us to enter into that, Larry can start tomorrow, even without title to the building yet. He can start that community engagement piece. And we've already had conversations with him of what that looks like and how we would proceed with that, again, given the COVID-19 restrictions that we see. But if the commission authorizes that LOI today, we can start tomorrow, basically.
Brian, what
Okay.
kind of a funding mechanism is going to be used by the city in this, if we have any at all?
Yeah, Tom, do you want to speak specifically to the LOI, and then I can touch base on what we've already expended
on the source. So basically the agreement, or the understanding in the letter of intent is that the city will be responsible for providing the funding either to the land bank or to Dylan if they're owning or holding the property, that will pay for the maintenance in maintaining utilities, outside, cutting grass, picking up trash, those kinds of general maintenance items. The city will cover those expenses up to $90,000 is what we've capped it at there. And that mimics the agreement that the commission has approved with the land bank. And so total exposure at this point through the LOI is $90,000. The understanding is that when the property is then transferred to Dylan or the LLC that is set up to receive it, the city will be compensated for whatever monies we've expended for that maintenance. And so we'll be made whole for any of that the money out of pocket.
Anything else, commissioners?
Yes, Larry, I liked what I saw and heard, particularly with the grocery store being a keystone to the development of the rest of that area. I understand these things take time, but the fact is we have about a third of our population that doesn't have a full service grocery store and needs one. And so I would encourage us to keep that in mind and to move as expeditiously as possible to the development of a grocery store. Even if we have to have a short-term plan followed by a longer-term plan. The citizens of the south side, east side, west side of Springfield need a full-service grocery store, and they don't have one right now. The other thing I would encourage, assuming that we approve the letter, is that Urban Fast Forward, who we engaged to do some work on housing redevelopment on the south side, has done a considerable amount of research and work. I'm hoping, Brian and Tom, that we could arrange for Urban Fast Forward to talk with Larry about the work they have done already. And we could see a merging of those two plans instead of having two plans that lead in different directions. From what I saw today, they look very compatible. But I think a discussion so that we could ensure that between Urban Fast Forward and Dylan Development would be critical and might save us a little time.
Yeah, I agree, Commissioner, and yes, we'll certainly make sure that that happens. I
Anything
was
else?
just going to say too, to Commissioner Estrop's question or point about the grocery, Larry and his folks, Patrick Williams have very early been thinking about the grocery concept and have been reaching out to grocers that may have an interest. So they have been actively doing that. I think what the LOI, the letter of intent, will give them the confidence that we're moving forward with them. And so they can become more aggressive in those efforts. But I know, in fact, that they see that as central to the development.
Okay. Can I ask one more question about the financial part of it? Is the building that we acquired at the other side on Clifton, or the $80-some thousand, is that going to be part of this also in the LOI?
Yes, it is.
So that will be a part of it. And then we're also committing the 90,000 as a potential payback after the whole deal gets moving.
Yeah, we would be made whole for both pieces.
Okay.
For the property, the money we expend to acquire the property adjacent to Kroger's, which I believe was $88,000, and then up to 90 for the maintenance expenses that we might incur taking care of it.
Okay. I just want to make sure what we're committing to.
Yeah, it'll be read to, anything that we expend. So if we decide, a month from now, 2 months from now, that something else emerges that we want to make part of this plan, we will fold that in as well and be reimbursed for that as well.
Okay.
Anything else from commissioners? Well, I just want to say as a South Sider that I am really anxious to see us move forward and see what we can do to restore to the people on the South Side what they've lost. So I'm really grateful to see us moving in this direction.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think, Larry, you had, did you want to mention the Freedom Tour event? It's another event that Larry's working on.
Yeah, if I could. First of all, thank you for the comments on the Kroger plan and the Four Corners concept. It is early. We're anxious to be working on it full time. There's lots of conversation that needs to occur before we settle on a final plan. One of the important things that we have learned so far is we've been doing spade work with potential grocers, is that they are extremely concerned that there's investment that goes beyond the borders of the Kroger building. They don't want to be an island. If they're going to take the risk of opening up a grocery, they want to know that additional investment is going to come alongside them. So it's very important for us, not only ourselves as potential investors, but for the community and for the tenants, to make certain that we're giving them a roadmap for where we'd like to see this go. So in addition to that, what I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the importance to us of community events. And we have, some of you may know that our firm has managed the Austin Landing development for the past 4 years. And in that period of time, we created an events program at that location. And we have raised over $750,000 for local charities through our events programming. What we are working on this summer, events programs have largely been put on the shelf, right, with the COVID environment. But our folks have been working on a COVID-friendly event that so many communities, as they have found out about it, gotten interested in. Credit to Springfield and Clark County being the first community to recognize that we could create an event that is safe for people to attend, very entertaining from a community perspective, and we can raise money for social opportunities. So the benefactors of the Freedom Tour event that is being scheduled at the Clark County Fairgrounds, the two benefactors of the profits are the Clark County Fairgrounds, and 50% of the proceeds would go to the Four Corners project specifically. So we're excited about that. We hope people in the community will support that. And I believe that Regina has some information about the event that can be distributed to all the commissioners if you haven't seen it already. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yes, we're done.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn the informal?
So moved.
Clerk will call the-
Second.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes,
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. The formal meeting of City Commission is called to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
here.
Dr. Estrop,
Here.
Mr. O'Neill,
Here.
Mr. Rue,
Here.
Mr. Copeland.
Here. Please join me in the invocation. Our God, we're grateful for new ideas of hope for the future. We are certainly aware of the suffering in our community and other communities around this country right now. And we pray for relief and for caring for each other through this process. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
United
States
States of America.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Nation.
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of our meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes,
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Clerk will proceed with first readings by title only.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a geographic information sharing GIS intergovernmental cooperation agreement with the Board of County Commissioners of Clark County, Ohio, for sharing of GIS data between the city and the county and making the GIS data available to the public for an amount not to exceed $30,000 for the 5-year term. Authorizing the city manager to enter into a Clark County City of Springfield Geographical Information System 2021-2025 consortium agreement with the Board of County Commissioners of Clark County, Ohio, and the Clark County Auditor for a shared geographical information system, GIS, and to allow the county to provide GIS services for the city of Springfield, Ohio, for an amount not to exceed $220,000 for the 5-year term. The next item had an amendment removing the, a sentence on page 1, the term date, after the publication of the agenda. Authorizing the city manager to enter into an amendment number 6 to the lease and special fixed-based operator agreement with Middletown Regional Flight Training Institute, LLC, doing business as Champion City Aviation, to allow for the continuation of flight training and aircraft maintenance services at the Springfield Beckley Municipal Airport.
Are there questions from commissioners on first readings?
yes, I would like our staff to explain the difference between 132-20 and 133-20. I realize one is a consortium.
Yes, I actually will ask Logan Cobbs. Logan's been working on these 2 agreements and can explain them in more detail.
Very good. Okay, so 132-20, this is the web hosting agreement with the county. So this is for actually sharing GIS data and the actual computer software that it takes to run this data. So it's also the equipment that they use to store, manipulate, and organize and present this data back to the city. And then we also make this public. Whereas 133-20, is them actually administering this program. So it's the mapping and the customizable websites that they make for the city. So it's really just maintaining and administering this program.
Thank you, Logan.
And I'll add to commissioners that this has been, you may recall, this agreement went into effect about 5 years ago. So this is the first renewal of that 5-year term. I can't say much more than this has been a great cooperation and collaboration between the city and the county. We used to have our own GIS technician. We could not accomplish that for the cost that we pay for this collaborative agreement. If we were to have our own person, we would be looking to spend probably well over $100,000. So this is a great collaboration between the city and the county. It's been working for the last 5 years. We receive a lot of benefit from this agreement, and we have worked very closely with the county auditors, John Federer, Shane Gray, and the GIS department, and our staff benefits greatly and our community benefits greatly from this relationship.
Thank you. That shows that we are working together in some aspects. Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will proceed with second readings.
Providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum principal amount of $97,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the costs of constructing and equipping improvements at the Springfield Beckley Municipal Airport, and providing for all related site improvements, including the construction of new hangars and taxi lanes, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Mr. Estrop. Your sound isn't on, Mr.
There we go.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment that I hope the public realizes that the airport is a great economic development tool for us. It continues to be critical to the future of economic development in our community, and that's why investments in it make very good sense. Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Structural Systems Repair Group, LLC, for the water treatment plant concrete repairs and wastewater treatment plant secondary clarifiers and effluent diversion concrete repair for an amount not to exceed $3,704,415.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and second. Question or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
At the request of the city manager, the next item has been held.
And could I request us to talk about this after we finish the agenda? Okay, proceed with emergency ordinances.
Adopting the tax budget of the city of Springfield, Ohio for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021, and submitting the same to the county auditor and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to execute a letter of intent, LOI, with Dillon LLC to aid in the redevelopment of the Kroger facility located at 1822 South Limestone Street and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to
So moved.
adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
I just want to comment on the presentation this afternoon was very, very good. It's one of the best I've ever heard with regards to that location and all the years we've been trying to do something in the South sector with Kroger. So again, I wish him the best because I think he's got all his dominoes are in a row, and I think it stands a good opportunity with someone like him in the lead.
I am assuming we all wish him well. I certainly join
Yeah.
what Kevin said.
I agree with Kevin.
Okay, clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Confirming and approving change order number 1 to the contract between the city and Majors Enterprises Incorporated for the Broadway reconstruction project to increase the contract in an amount not to exceed $130,565 for a total amount not to exceed $3,222,911, and authorizing the city manager to execute said change order number 1 and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Mr. Estrop.
Yes, I would like to know what necessitated the change order.
Yep, I will ask Chris Moore to actually answer that question. I'm calling him up now. There we go.
Yes, Commissioner. So approximately $35,000 of this change order is related to additional work on the water line. It was realized upon excavation that there was a 10-inch and a 6-inch water line kind of randomly serving the properties. The 6-inch was in poor repair and it was installed in rock, laying on the rock. So we opted to connect everyone to the 10-inch water line and abandon the 6-inch water line, so we no longer have that liability. $95,000 of this was related to the fact that as we started digging, we saw that many of the sewer laterals were shared by 2 and in some cases 3 neighbors. And these laterals, as they went out into the street, were in very poor repair. Rather than build a new street over these failing laterals and leave property owners to argue about who would be responsible if it failed, we thought the best thing to do was to replace these laterals and get new plumbing from the main out of the right of way.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Outdoor Enterprise LLC for the Center Street Streetscape project for an amount not to exceed $188,495.40 and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Yes. Could the staff talk about what part of Center Street that the streetscape project will encompass?
Yes, Commissioner. So this project is surrounding the block where the current Center Street Towns project is being completed. So this will complete the streetscape from Main Street to Columbia along Center Street, as well as on Main Street from Mill Run Place to Center Street, and on Columbia from Mill Run Place to Center Street. The section of this block along Mill Run Place on the east side has already had the streetscape components added. So this will bring, as we continue to try to implement the unified plan and add the streetscape, which includes the decorative street lights, the brick pavers, and the decorative street trees. This will help complete another block section within our downtown, continuing our investment and reinvestment in our core of the community.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
The next items attachments have been replaced with the executed documents since the agenda was published. Declaring it necessary to improve public streets and easements by constructing and installing on certain property within the city's street improvements, water and sewer lines, storm drains, and all necessary appurtenances, and declaring an emergency therein.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from commission? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
The next item has been added to the agenda, supporting and approving the use of face coverings and 6 feet of social distancing to all members of the public to reduce and prevent the transmission of COVID-19 and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Yes, I just wanted to thank the Clark County Combined Health District. Today I received on my door a bag with information regarding testing sites and different masks. So we are good to go in our community. If you are not on board yet, please remember, we are fighting an invisible virus. So thank you.
I would like to also comment that this is not a matter of just being appropriate and being courteous. This is a matter of life and death for some. It's a matter of health. And as the governor pointed out yesterday, the mask is a symbol of freedom. It allows us to continue to reopen this state and yet do so in a way that's safe so that we're not putting people at risk. So I strongly encourage people to, in fact, use masks, engage in social distancing, and wash your hands frequently. I think it's a good way to keep us moving forward. Thank you.
I guess I need to add that the bags or the packages are put on doors in the community from the Combined Health District. So we really have no excuse now not to wear masks since we were provided with them. So thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
That's all the agenda items.
That concludes our agenda. Are there other items to come before us from members of the commission?
I have a question. I think we were going to discuss item that was pulled, and I think Jill has a letter to read. Am I correct, Jill?
I have one comment from a citizen, yes.
No, I meant from our county commissioner, Melanie Wilk Black.
Yes, that's who I meant, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like me to proceed, Mayor?
Fine.
This comment came from Melanie Flax-Wilt. She's the Clark County Commission President. Good afternoon, Commissioners. As you continue to consider moving forward with the MOU to partner with the county's dispatch system, I want to welcome you all to contact me for a phone call or meeting. Our team has been working closely with the City Manager Heck, and I hope your employees know how hard he has worked to ensure their treatment in the Memorandum of Understanding. The county also prides itself on being an excellent employer and being a great place to work. As you know, further details can be vetted through the contract process and union negotiations if we take this first step of reaching an MOU. A key part of the MOU is our agreement to a new operating structure and advisory board that establish more structured input from the City of Springfield. Part of that is input on policies for the dispatch center moving forward. Please know that the county's personnel policies are not uniform across elected officials' departments, and it is not unusual for there to be slight variations from office to office. In the case of the Sheriff's Department, the policy of no vacation leave for the first year is across the board for every employee coming into the department. They can, however, earn and use comp time as well as personal time off during the first year. It's my understanding that this has been the department policy for many years. I'm confident that through partnership, we will be able to provide the citizens and the residents of Springfield and Clark County a seamless 911 communication system that will serve them well for many years to come, wherever they may live, work, or find themselves in an emergency situation. This arrangement is both a wise use of taxpayer resources and will positively impact our number one priority of public safety.
Mr. Estrop.
I am greatly saddened and very frankly, extremely frustrated that we've had to withdraw this MOU. A combined dispatch center makes good sense. But very frankly, the behavior demonstrated by the sheriff is not going to build an efficient and effective dispatch center. You do not build strong teams by pitting members of the team against each other and considering some to be first-class citizens and others second. We need, in order for dispatch to work, a system that is both efficient and saves the taxpayers money, which this would, and effective, and that requires dispatchers who are willing to work together and who like working together and who are working in an atmosphere that promotes teams, does not in fact work to the contrary. I am very saddened by this. And I would encourage the people of Springfield and Clark County to follow the sheriff's race very closely. And I would encourage you to ask these questions of the candidates. 1, do you want a combined dispatch center? 2, what are you willing to do to make that happen? Because I haven't seen much evidence to date that the sheriff's office is willing to do much other than take over dispatch and tell us how we must meet their standards, even if they're not what we want. Thank you very much.
So to respond specifically to what the sheriff has done and what the previous letter suggested, they're not hiring our people new, we're combining people. And from my point of view, to treat our people, some of whom have years and years of experience, and in my opinion, are at least as good, if not better than their people, and say that they're beginners is an insult. And I will not stand for that insult any more than Mr. Estrop. Other commissioners want to say anything?
Yes, I have a concern because on the memorandum of understanding under intent, it reads that it is the will and intent of the parties of this MOU that the new dispatch organization have a workforce in which wages and conditions of employment to include seniority will be recognized as best as possible. And to recognize as best as possible our dispatchers as new employees is not being recognized as best as possible. And this is undue hardship on our current dispatchers, because when your life is up and you don't know about your employment, and to say that you are a new employee when you have worked for the city for umpteen years, but now you're going into the county as a new employee, I don't quite get it. So there's a lot of things that need to be worked out. And I'm sure our city manager and the unions will work on this, because this is not going with the intent of the MOU.
Other commissioners want to comment?
Kevin, you want to speak first?
Oh, no, you go first. I went first last time and you shot me down. You go. I'm going last.
So I'm a businessman. And if I was joining with another business that would increase my business, I would do it in such a way that would be welcoming, that would blend opportunities, that would cause harmony, that would create a way that everybody would succeed. And unfortunately, today this had to get pulled because that's not what's really happening. I think there are people in the county and the city that really would like to see this happen. And I question if there are also people in the county, in the city that don't want to see this happen. So I'm speaking from my opinion and not any of the other commissioners' opinion. This is the best thing we could do if it can be done right. If it is not done right, then what the mayor said, what Dr. Estrop said, what Joyce said, this is not right for our people. This is not about a handful of dispatchers that could be upset about this. This is about how the over 550 employees are watching our city manager and our commission respond to a collaborative effort with another government entity. That was one of the reasons when I ran, I wanted to see what we could do to collaborate together with other government entities in the private sector. I agree with Dr. Estrop. This does bother me that we've had to pull this, or this has been pulled off the agenda, because this needs to be done so we can get to the next step. But it seems like there is little things that are being put in that may be perceived by other public members that don't understand the total picture, that it's just a little thing and we just need to get over it. But unfortunately, that little thing can be tied to a lot bigger things. How an employee is treated. If I had 30 years of experience and then my bosses were collaborating and coming together, but they valued me here, then they didn't show me value when they got together, that would not work. And it would not be good for the entire organization, not just the dispatch, but the entire organization. So this needs to happen if it can happen right. If it doesn't happen, it is because it wasn't right for the city of Springfield, and it will not destroy the city of Springfield. If we got to move on, we got to move on, and we can do it. And still, we could save money by combining, but at the same time, it's not going to kill the city of Springfield financially not to do this. There is a building that I went to the groundbreaking that has been built that would house both the county and the city beautifully. It would be great. But that's not the reason why we should just jump on board just because the building's been built before the biggest customer of this 911 dispatch is secured. Sorry. It needs to be right for everybody, not just for one entity.
Wow, I agree with almost all that. That's really kind of cool. No, I think that first of all, I want to commend Brian for having the courage to back away. You know, it took a lot of moxie for him to come forth to this commission and bring something back to the table that we took off more than once. That shows me that he is trying to make this happen, and he represents us in the end result. And that's very important to me. I have all the confidence in the world in Brian Heck. Having said that, I wasn't elected by Brian Heck. I was elected by the community several times. And my concern is not as much as the employees being treated fairly, because as long as Brian's around, they're going to be treated fairly. My concern is the delivery of the services that our citizens of the city of Springfield have become accustomed to without asking for it. You know, I remember when our dispatch was being performed by the firefighters, and we backed off of that because we wanted all the firefighters on the street, not in a dispatch center. And that worked out fine. That's when police and fire decided they were going to dispatch together, and we hired individual dispatchers. And quite frankly, it has worked out well. It wasn't perfect in the beginning, just like this will not be perfect if it would ever happen in the beginning. But there's got to be a level of management that everyone buys into and trusts. That's not existing right now. And whether this happened today or whether it happened after the memorandum of understanding was approved and they were negotiating, something was going to happen along the way that we were going to have this discussion. You know, I said to Brian the other day when he told me, I said, it's really kind of better that it happened today than another year down the road when we're ready to get in this and we've already pissed off everybody that works for us that has concerns. Because whether we like it or not, if you've been here for 25 years and 27 years and 19 years, whether you're a firefighter, a policeman, or a dispatcher, this is going to affect you. Not to mention the heartburn that the people of Springfield that are going to feel when they're waiting for an emergency squad to show up or a policeman to show up to help them. So they don't care who dispatches it, quite frankly, as long as they get the service that they want. So again, I'm not opposed to a combined dispatch, but I've read every letter that I've gotten, and there's a lot of people that are concerned about it, and we should be concerned, and I think we all are. I'm confident of that now. And again, I think that the county has been sent a very valuable message today. The same one that they were sent when they pulled the rug out from under us before and the one before that. We're willing to listen. We're willing to talk about it, but we're not going to sell our souls when we've got a perfectly good dispatch center, because that's all we're talking about now is dispatch. We have a perfectly good one that works every day. And I think someone just said here that we're not going to go broke by keeping it. So why would we throw it away until we know for sure it's what we want to do? But again, I appreciate all the comments that I've heard over here this morning or this afternoon, and especially Brian Heck's leadership on this. Because just if you've read all the memos, the one he sent out just 2 days ago was in response to the complaints that he had from some of our employees. But yet the way I read that, he was still promoting this to go along. I think the straw that broke this camel's back was you're right, Dr. Estrop. It's what the sheriff did. No question. That broke the straw that broke the camel's back as far as Brian Heck was concerned on this particular part of the issue. So again, I thank you for listening for a few minutes. Appreciate it.
So I just want to say the big picture thing for me is that what this suggests is that there are problems in this being run by the sheriff. If the sheriff can do what the sheriff wants to do, I am very reluctant to get into this deal. That's not where we started out years ago when we wanted to create this joint call center. And at that point, we were going to have all of us involved in making decisions, not just the sheriff. And I'm very concerned if what this signals is that the sheriff will do what the sheriff wants to do. And I'm not necessarily talking about the current sheriff, whoever succeeds this sheriff, and we have no control over who gets elected sheriff. I don't know if this is the way it's going to work. It scares me a bit, not a bit, a whole lot. Did you want to say something, Brian?
I think commissioners captured kind of the situation perfectly. I talk in the collective, my staff and I, we obviously had reservations, but we've worked to try to minimize the impacts to our employees, to how the operations would be ran in a manner that we felt we could advance forward. Unfortunately, an issue arose that I thought had been worked through as of the end of last week, was brought back to the forefront yesterday, and it does concern me. It concerns me greatly that what may seem to some as a very small issue or change in the way that this was going to be handled had much larger ramifications and impacted things more than just that one minor issue or what could be perceived as one small issue. It had a greater impact, a larger impact, and would have sent repercussions into the grand scheme of dispatch, which, as Kevin said, dispatch is, people want to know when they call dispatch that they have somebody on the end of the line that, one, picks up the phone, but then properly dispatches for whatever emergency that they have going on in their life, because that's the time they need us most, is when they call us. And to put that in jeopardy by risking losing our employees that are necessary for the success of this combined center, it concerned me and was a reservation to me, and why ultimately I made the decision to pull this from the agenda at this time, because those things need to be worked out further for me to be comfortable with us moving forward. And again, I appreciate all the comments that were made by all of the commissioners. I think you guys captured what was going on and what is going on this issue, rightfully so. I think you guys captured everything. And I agree with all of the concerns raised by each and every one of you.
Anything else on this issue?
Yeah, I do. I just want to, because it will be perceived that we found something to bring up to say, hey, this may not be right, when actually what Brian just said was it was done until something came up last week that wasn't new, it was thought to be settled. So we'll get off here, and there may be comments from other leaders in the community that will try to pick this apart. But the bottom line is this was fine until something came up that we thought was handled. It's just important to repeat that again, because I was surprised the last time when we had a discussion publicly about this, there was comments made from other community leaders that were published that were absolutely, it was incorrect. So I want to make sure that we know we were on board with this to move forward so this thing could get to negotiation with unions until something happened that we thought was taken care of, came back up as it wasn't taken care of. And therefore what the mayor said is, and what Brian said, it just threads through to what could be a real problem down the road and unfair treatment for our longtime staff members. I still think combined dispatch is a good idea, but it has to be done right.
I think we all agree on that.
Of course,
both points.
In response to Rob's, and will ultimately affect the people who are actually using the service.
Yep.
That's the goal. We don't want to discount. We don't want to lessen that effect. We have to deliver it. And I would think in a brand new facility with all these new state-of-the-art things, they would expect, quote, better service.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think we give pretty damn good service.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be tough to deliver anyway. But I mean,
I also want to say that I think it was said also that I think our staff members do an excellent job with how they've been trained and what they do. And I'm certain that county dispatchers do a really good job with how they've been trained and how they handle calls. So I don't want to get into this better that than better you than this. That's not what I want to leave this commission meeting thinking. That's what we said. Each have been trained, each do their job well, combined together. What will that look like? So I just wanted to say that.
I have one more comment. It's not a comment, but I would like to hear from our city manager on how we got to this point, because before we thought it was a mute issue.
Yeah, so again, back in October, we had kind of reached a stalemate in the negotiations. And it boiled down to the treatment of our employees then. At that time, it really boiled down to pay and how they were treated in terms of pay. And at one point in time, the offer that was on the table would have taken a portion of our employees back, set them back to take over a $9 an hour pay cut. That was concerning at that time. We weren't going to move forward with that. Then we kind of resumed negotiations or discussions in the early part of 2020. Obviously COVID restrained or prevented some of those as we were busy and working on some other things for our communities. But then Jenny Hutchinson, the county administrator, and I resumed conversations in early May from an offer or a proposal that was on the table from the sheriff. We worked diligently through that. There were still some concerns. Again, I believe we got to a point where we minimized the impact as much as possible to our employees, where I felt comfortable that we could move forward with an MOU. A lot would have had to be shaken out during negotiations, but the MOU was presented in a manner that we would, we'd see where the chips fell in negotiations, whether that was accomplished, and then we would work towards an actual contract between the city and county after those negotiations were completed. Again, it's difficult for me to recommend moving forward when one item of the MOU related to the 3-to-1. I think the mayor made the point perfectly earlier that these are not brand new employees off the street. These are employees with much experience. These are employees that are vital to the success of the operation. And even with the 3-to-1, they weren't being fully recognized for those years of service that they've had, even with that conversion ratio or conversion factor brought into the mix. And that is, again, working with the state FOP union and their representation on this. They had some concerns. I thought we had worked through some of those concerns even as late as last week. And then apparently things had changed and shifted just yesterday to where that wasn't the case anymore, that we had not been able to successfully work through those items with the sheriff at the time. And so that is why I made the recommendation to pull it and not take a vote on it at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we move on to other issues? Let me just speak for myself. Somewhere around 9 o'clock every night, someone starts firing off firecrackers on the west side of Perrin Woods. We live on the east side of Perrin Woods, and it continues often until 1 or 2 in the morning. We have got to see if there isn't something we can do to stop this. And I think a whole lot of citizens in the community are very upset about this. And we need, I'm not sure it'll be easy, but I think we've got to try to do something to stop this.
I'd like to hear from the chief a little bit on what's even done today.
Yeah, I'm requesting him to start his video, and Mike, I'll just add, and Jill Allen can add on too. I do want to reassure the community, we do, some of the Facebook chatter was about we need to implement or we need to put law in place that prohibits the use and possession of fireworks in the community. I want to assure our community we have that in place. We actually have an ordinance that's already in place that deals with just that issue, and it's specifically to fireworks. The entire ordinance is written specifically to fireworks, and so we have that in place. The state also has, even though there is movement on some potential legislation to make it legal, that has not been voted through and approved all the way, and we've heard that the governor would not actually support that, but until that happens, we don't know. But I want people to know locally and at the state level, there are ordinances and laws in place that prohibit the use and possession of those fireworks in our community in Springfield. Jill, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. And then Lee, after Jill, if you want to also kind of touch on what you guys are looking at and how you're working to fix or help this issue in our community, that would be appreciated.
Sure. So what we've seen and what the mayor's talking about is an exponential use of fireworks this year. It's not uncommon that we hear this start in May and usually goes off for the 4th, but this is not just our community. So there's a lot of different events that are going on that are making the use of fireworks that much more frequent. So there is a code section, and that's typically what we would enforce from the revised code. It is illegal to have possession of fireworks and illegal to use fireworks. So it's not just using. You cannot have possession of the fireworks. Our local code mirrors the revised code. And I don't know if Lee's available and wants to speak further about that and what the police have been doing as far as enforcement goes.
Let me just add something to what you just said. I was listening to NPR and they interviewed someone in New York complaining about the same thing. So I think this is a national phenomenon, but that doesn't make it any better when I can't sleep at night. Chief, what do you want to say?
Well, I'd kind of like to echo what everybody else has said already, and remind citizens that fireworks are and have been illegal in the state of Ohio, throughout the years. I have asked our patrol units that when we find people that are using fireworks, when we find people that are in possession of fireworks, quite frankly, because of the immensity of the problem, they be charged. I think a lot of our citizens have discussed this. I don't think warnings suit in this situation anymore. I would remind citizens that it may be fun for an individual, but this can also be a dangerous practice. It can cause property damage. Obviously, it causes issues of keeping people up at night, like Warren and myself as well.
My 3-year-old son.
And on and on.
I didn't mean to be picking out me. I suspect all my neighbors are upset too.
I would agree, but I think it's always good to personalize a problem. And
This is north and south too. It's all everywhere. It's not
Yeah,
just
it's
south.
all over town.
It's all over.
Commissioners, it's everywhere. And that's part of the problem. I realize that if we catch one person, we've got 60 other people that are out there doing it or more at any given time. It's spread throughout our community. But also just to finish what it does to animals in the home. And I would also remind, since this is a patriotic holiday that often launches this, we have a lot of veterans in our community and a lot of citizens that have PTSD issues. And it's a hard adjustment for them as well to listen to a firefight going on outside their house all night long. I realize that we've gone through some hard times with COVID. I realize that we've gone through some hard times as a nation and still are over the last few weeks, but it's not an excuse to be discourteous to each other and to our neighbors. I would just ask citizens as a personal appeal to understand this and to try to, well, basically to cease in this activity because you can and will be charged if you're caught.
Anything else from commissioners? Mr. Estrop?
Yes, comment and then a question for the chief.
Hey, Dave.
There is legislation pending in the Senate, the Ohio Senate, that would legalize fireworks. Unfortunately, Representative Kaler voted yes to support it in the House, but the vote has not been taken in the Senate. So I would encourage people who are upset with what's going on related to the use of fireworks, that you contact State Senator Bob Hackett and let Senator Hackett know how you feel. The governor has said, made it very clear how he feels. This is not only a nuisance and robs people of sleep, but it's a health and safety issue. And we need to recognize that. I am all for fireworks associated with the celebration of the 4th of July, legal use of fireworks. Chief, my question is this. If the police officers, in fact, find somebody to be in possession of the fireworks, can those fireworks be seized? Will they be seized by the officers?
Commissioner, yes, they can and will, because of the fact, as Jill has mentioned, because fireworks are illegal to possess in the state of Ohio, that makes them contraband, just like any kind of illegal drug or anything else like that. So officers can take them and turn them in to be destroyed.
Very good, thank you. I would hope that's a practice that we engage in. I just want people to make use of the fireworks responsibly. And this has gone on too long and involves too much. So thank you.
Jill, is our ordinance still enforceable with the non-use of fireworks if the state does pass the ordinance statewide? If we still have an ordinance, or if they change the Ohio Revised Code and we have a code that's, and we have an ordinance that says you can't use them in the city of Springfield, does that trump that?
That potentially could under supremacy clause, but that's where you get into home rule. And I would imagine there might be a good amount of cities with the Ohio Municipal League that would oppose that. So if that gets some traction in the Ohio legislature, we'll have to see if there's going to be opposition to it.
Okay, but okay.
Anything else from commissioners? I think we have some citizens who want to address us too, so. Okay, Chief, what do you got from citizens?
I received 5 emails that request that I read these for a commission meeting. Dear commission members, this is from Nick Mastic, 930 South Fountain Avenue. Dear commission members, I'm a resident of 930 South Fountain Avenue and request that the city do something about the ongoing, since early June, and constant setting off of fireworks beginning at dusk and going off till the wee hours. People are setting them off near my home and it feels like a war zone. My dog is petrified and shakes violently and it's hard to calm him down. He is not eating properly and does not want to go outside when it's necessary to relieve himself. I'm not talking about simple firecrackers, but M80s and beyond. Roman candles are fired off in all directions. I understand the police are limited and can only respond to so much, but the constant barrage of deafening noise is unacceptable, and you as city leaders must find some solution to this problem. The next email was from Ruth Weingartz, 930 South Fountain Avenue. I recently moved to the historical South Fountain Avenue neighborhood in Springfield. Early evening, starting at around 9:30 p.m., fireworks explode in the street, sometimes directly in front of my house. The walls and windows shake, my dog has a panic attack, and I can't sleep. This happens every night, one evening until 12:45 p.m. On the weekend, it goes until about 1:30 or 2 a.m. We're talking professional quality, expensive fireworks, the kind that go kaboom on the ground and the kind that shoot up and pop in multicolored fiery embers shooting across the night sky. These are real fireworks and they should not be going off in a residential neighborhood. They're disruptive and dangerous. I've called the police multiple times and they do absolutely nothing. I've tried talking with my neighbors directly, multiple households, and they all said they're going to keep doing what they want and they don't care. This started in May and every night it gets worse. I know other neighbors are as fed up, tired, and upset as I am about the nightly fireworks in Springfield. Life is stressful enough right now without cannons exploding outside my bedroom window on a nightly basis. This has to end. I'm sure veterans who live in Springfield are really struggling right now. Someone's roof could catch fire. I'm especially deeply concerned to learn that fireworks will become completely legal in the state of Ohio in July 2020. Is that why Springfield police are enforcing the current laws and handing out misdemeanors? What's Springfield's plan going forward? The next is from Christina Bryant, 801 South Fountain Avenue. Hello, Springfield Commission. I'm writing today to express my frustrations with the nightly fireworks that have been occurring since May. I'm a constituent from Springfield, Ohio, living in the Springfield Historic South Fountain District and have lived here for 34 years. Thank you for time to take my email. I generally not reached out to governmental representatives, but this is an issue affecting me nightly. For the past 7 weeks, every single day, there have been fireworks going off in the evening between the hours of 7 p.m. and 2 a.m. within earshot of my house. This is not an exaggeration. There hasn't been an evening where we have been without the extremely loud bangs that sound like we're on a battlefield. It's stressful to say the least. Ignoring my personal plight for a moment, fireworks are a disruption to the family life of others. Fireworks wake up babies and scare small children, putting them in distress. Firework frightens pets and make them harder to live with and be comfortable. Fireworks are a disturbance to those who have to sleep and wake up for work the next morning. Fireworks are a fire hazard that can ignite houses, trees, bushes, and more. Fireworks are, I don't know this word, percolates that contaminate water and get into the bloodstream of humans and have possible carcinogenic effects. Fireworks are a great source of injuries, and many hospitals report an increase of hospitalizations due to fireworks during the summer months. Fireworks can lead to permanent hearing loss, and finally, most important point is fireworks can trigger flashbacks and be extremely painful for active military personnel and veterans. For these reasons, and for the simple reason of humans should be able to live their lives free of terrifying booms at 150 to 170 decibels and be able to get a peaceful night's sleep, I must implore you and our local government and law enforcement to intervene. We cannot allow fireworks displays every night. One more from James Kaufman, 2118 Rutland Avenue. I write to express my concerns over the recent wave of fireworks being launched over the last several weeks in the city. These fireworks tend to start in the evening and have been known to last into the early hours of the morning. This has been a nightly occurrence since Memorial Day. I currently have a veteran with PTSD residing with me during this pandemic, and the fireworks are a significant trigger for them. I've made numerous calls to our city's non-emergency police number to report the fireworks, which have led to little or no resolution. Dispatchers have identified that numerous calls have been made from multiple areas of the city, and the recent changes at the state level have limited our law enforcement's current response capacity. I've spoken with a law enforcement officer after one of my reports and explained my concerns and my roommate's mental health. He appeared ashamed that he could do nothing effective. He mentioned that he could not arrest a group without knowing who set off the fireworks and that there are difficulties tracking the individuals responsible. It must be realized then that our local law enforcement is indeed limited in this situation. Thus, I come to you to redress and assistance in this matter. I believe that the city should take a stand for the residents of Springfield, those suffering from mental health concerns and otherwise, and be an example to our state and nation. I propose the following measures be taken. City institute a ban on the use of unauthorized fireworks within the city limits. Most of these are the same as what the other letters have already stated. The health and well-being of our residents is paramount, and I believe that removing this threat to the mental health of our citizens will improve our city. The final email is from Linda and Jessica Threats, 232 Delcourt Drive. Hello, this letter is to give you my written frustration in another business leaving the south side of Springfield. We are losing the only financial institution in this quadrant. We received notification yesterday that PNC is closing in September 2020. We lost the last of 5 grocery stores on this side of town barely 3 months ago. We are expected to pay property and city income taxes, are not given the same amenities as other sides of town. Our Main Street, Center, and Yellow Spring Streets are not patched or repaved. All new businesses and new buildings in Springfield seem to be geared toward the north side, east side, and downtown areas. When will the City of Springfield and the Chamber of Commerce stop neglecting the south side and build it up, considering it is off the main east and west interstate of 70? Why does the Chamber of Commerce steer businesses to state route entrances that do not lead directly to the city? I believe we, the tax-paying citizens of the south side of Springfield, deserve some answers and solutions. That's all.
Okay. Anything else from commissioners?
Just one other thing. I too am frustrated by the fireworks, but I wanted our city manager to give a solution for anybody that wants to do that. Don't you need a permit? And can you get that from the state?
Yes, so the only way on our ordinance for you to legally possess and fire off fireworks in the city is if you were what's considered a public exhibitioner of fireworks. And that is defined in our code as meeting the criteria and the requirements of the Ohio Revised Code, which lays out a process to be permitted and licensed to do that. So to work with the state, you would need to work with the Department of Commerce, the Ohio Department of Commerce, and they would be able to assist you through that process to meet the requirements of Ohio Revised Code. But that is the only way that you can legally possess and shoot off fireworks. And again, those public exhibitioners of fireworks by the state's law are, you know, you see companies like Rosie's and other companies that work to do the public fireworks displays like we're accustomed to around the July 4th holiday out at the fairgrounds. Those are companies and eligible entities because they've gone through the process of being permitted and licensed through the state of Ohio.
So the reality is the average citizen will have to be licensed in order to do it.
Yes.
Thank you, which means that they are not.
Yeah.
The average citizen is not a licensed fireworks exhibitionist. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else? Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved. Second.
I think we have a motion and a second. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estrad,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes, for day
Mr.
2.
Copeland.
Yes. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.